Hey everyone, Mark here. Just a quick announcement before the episode. Resourceful Designer is in the running for a People's Choice Podcast Award. I was a finalist in both 2016 and 17, but I failed to make the ballot in 2018 and 19, and I would love to right that ship in 2020. So if you would like to help the show by nominating Resourceful Designer for the Podcast Awards, I would really appreciate it. To do so, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/podcast awards. And when you land on the page, click on the line that reads, "Click me to nominate my favorite podcast." Do not click on the blue button. That's to register the show, and Resourceful Designer has already been registered. So click the "Click me to nominate my favorite podcasts." Now, yes, you will have to register your email address, but once you do, it'll take you to the nomination page. And you can find Resourceful Designer listed under the arts category as well as the education category. So I would appreciate your vote in both categories, and then feel free to select any podcast you like in the remaining categories. And if you're not sure who to pick in the sports category, Wayne Henderson, the gentleman who's done the voice intro for every episode of Resourceful Designer, you hear him at the beginning of every episode. Wayne is a huge Green Bay Packers fan and host of the Packers Fan Podcast. So if you'd like to help Wayne out and you're not sure who to vote for in the sports category, I would appreciate you casting yours towards the Packers Fan Podcast. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you nominating Resourceful Designer once again in the arts category and the education category. And I'll keep my fingers crossed that once the nomination period ends July 31st, the Resourceful Designer shows up on the final ballot. And now, on with the show. Resourceful Designer, episode 224, Securing WordPress Websites.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. I love recording these intros for you, Mark. Keep them coming. Mark Descote.
Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. In this week's episode, I'm going to share the strategy that I use for securing my clients' WordPress websites. And I'm going to share a tip of the week that may help your creativity. Now, what have I been up to this week? Well, I completed a set of signage for our local tourism business, their information booths, and the whole new program. They're revamping it this summer, so they needed some new signage. I got that done. Did some work on an existing client's website. They needed some updates, did that. Worked on a few podcast artworks. One of them needed a little bit of a revision. The other one got approved. First proof I showed, they approved it. So that's always fun when that happens. And also trying a few things with my podcast branding business. I put out my first Facebook ad this week. Nothing big. It was just a short little video that I did that I want to try to get views on. So I'm not actually trying to send anything to my business. It's just right now I'm running an ad to try to get video views in order to attract an audience to begin with. It's all part of the sales funnel that I'm following. I also did my very first Instagram story for podcast branding this week. That was a little different. Although I've been posting to Instagram on a regular basis, I haven't really gotten into the story aspect of it. So I gave that a little bit of a shot, and I liked it. I enjoyed it. I don't know how much engagement it actually brought in, but I plan on doing a few more soon. I'm also thrilled that I am going to be the global sponsor for an upcoming virtual podcast summit. This is a new online conference. It's going to be a week-long conference, and they're hoping to get up to 100,000 people viewing the conference. And they launched with an Indiegogo campaign, and they had one spot for a global sponsor. And it was a little bit pricey, but I jumped on it. The criteria was you had to have a business in the podcast space, you had to be a solopreneur, and your business had to be less than 2 years old. And I fit all those criteria. So I took that one sponsorship opportunity, which means that podcast branding will be front and center across the app. They're using an app for this conference, and my branding will be front and center on the app for everyone who views the conference to see. So I really wanted to get this so that it brings attention to podcast branding, get the name out there more, and I think this is really going to help. So I'm really excited with that. And one last thing, I just want to give a quick shout out to Roger in the Netherlands. I just want to thank you. Roger tagged me in an Instagram post that he put out. He was showing his top 3 design podcasts, and Resourceful Designer was number 1 at the top of his list, followed by Logo Geek and Let's Talk Branding, both also some good shows. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out on the podcast to Roger for being a loyal listener. Now, speaking of being loyal, the Resourceful Designer community is going really strong. There's some really fun things happening in there. Kat finally filed her business papers, so she now has a registered business, and she's finalizing her branding for her business. So that's really exciting, showing us the work. We've been helping her out a little bit and refining some stuff with her, and it's really coming along nicely, so really happy for her. And there's been some other great discussion about website building and discussions on plugins for membership sites and stuff for job boards, as well as some pretty weird conversations we've had with our clients, or weird proposals that people have been asking, or not proposals, but questions that clients have been asking us. So a lot of fun conversations. We still have our weekly video chat, and the last meeting we had 8 people on it, which was really good. I had a great time chit-chatting about that, talking about what sort of projects we've been working on, asking for some help on a few little things, getting some advice, and just connecting, getting to know each other better. So it's fun. After attending these meetings for several weeks in a row with certain people, you get to know them and you get to joke around with them. And it's like hanging out with a bunch of friends after a while. But we're all designers. We all have our own design businesses, and we're all in there in order to grow as designers. Now, if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, we would love to have you as a member as well. And you can join by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/community. And now this week's tip of the week. And this week's tip is, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit of a cop-out. I didn't have time to think of a resource or anything like that. But I just wanted to tell you, with all the COVID-19 thing that's been going on at the time we're recording this, or I'm recording this, it's still towards the beginning of July 2020. And I just wanted to say that whenever possible, just try to get outside. Try to clear your head, even if it's just going for a walk around the block. Maybe you're not comfortable going out in public places or hanging out with crowds or that. But even if you just go for a walk around your block, just getting out there, getting some fresh air, clearing your head can really help you creatively. Because if you're hunkered down inside day after day, just sitting at your computer and that, after a while, you can start burning out without even realizing it. So change your environment whenever you can. Step outside, even if it's just out on a balcony, and just look around, refresh yourself. So that's this week's tip of the week. And now, securing WordPress websites. A couple of months ago, I released an episode where I shared a web hosting strategy for extra income. That episode was 216 if you're interested in going back and listening to it. Well, part of that strategy is offering website maintenance plans. Now, after that episode aired, I received a lot of questions from people pertaining to the security side of my maintenance plan, asking what I did exactly. Enough questions, in fact, that I thought it might be a good idea to do an episode focused solely on what I do to secure my clients' websites. Now, before I go on any further, I just want to state that there are many, many different ways and many different tools available for securing a WordPress website. I'm going to talk about what I know, about what I do, and the tools that I use. There may be better ways of doing things, and there may be less expensive ways of doing things. But this is the method that has worked for me. Now, the main tools that I use are from iThemes. And if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you know I mention iThemes over and over. Now, in today's episode, I'm primarily going to talk about iThemes Security Pro and iThemes Sync. I don't really talk about Backup Buddy, but it does play into the whole thing. Now, if you're interested in learning more about these iTheme products, you can visit resourcefuldesigner.com/iThemes. As a full disclaimer, I am an affiliate for iThemes, meaning if you purchase any of their products through the link that I just shared, resourcefuldesigner.com/iThemes, I will earn a commission on the sale. But with that said, the reason I'm an affiliate for iThemes is because I use and I trust them myself. I wouldn't share anything with you unless I had full confidence in it. And I've been using iThemes products for a number of years now, so I have full confidence in them. So, WordPress security. Those two words together may sound intimidating to the uninitiated, but let me assure you that they're not. If I can learn how to do this, so can you. I'm not a programmer. I'm not even a web developer. I'm just a web designer. I'm just a WordPress user who has figured out a security strategy that works for me. But before I get into that, let me talk about what exactly a WordPress security strategy is. WordPress security is putting certain measures in place in order to drastically decrease the chance of a website being compromised or getting hacked. You'll note that I said drastically decrease the chance, not prevent a website from being compromised. There are no guarantees when it comes to WordPress security. And if you offer this service to your clients, you need to be sure that they understand this. There are no guarantees when it comes to this. If a skilled hacker is determined to gain access to a website, they will. And there's not much you or anyone else can do about it. The purpose of website security or WordPress security is to make it difficult for them. Enough so that they decide to leave your site alone and go in search of an easier target. You see, most hacking attempts can be easily prevented with a few simple measures. And here's what I do. Step 1, securing the account login. By default, every WordPress installation provides an easy access for administrators and for users to gain access or entry to the site through a specific URL. And if you know anything about WordPress, you know exactly what URL I'm talking about. It's whatever the site domain is .com/wp-login.php. Now, this default makes the WordPress login page the most attacked part of any website, because 95, 98, 99% of WordPress websites out there have that page. So it's the starting point for most hackers. So how do you secure the account login? Well, the first step that I take is to hide the backend. Now, I use iThemes Security Pro for this, and they have a feature that allows you to hide the backend of the website and replace it with a login page of your choosing. And that way, if somebody goes to whatever website.com/wp-login.php, instead of going to a login page, it actually takes them to a 404 page not found error. What I do is I change that website.com/ instead of the wp-login.php, I change it to something else, a different word. For example, and this is not what I actually use, but maybe it's Open Sesame or Gateway or who knows, whatever. You can change it to anything you want, and that becomes the new login page. Now, of course, this is what they call security by obscurity. So it's not a very strong method of security, but it may help some automated bots that go around just looking for websites to hack. And if the bot doesn't find the proper page, it might move on. So why not do it? So that's the first thing I do on every client website I have is I hide the backend login page. Now, the next thing is to force the use of a strong password. In last week's tip of the week, I shared some statistics that are actually worth re-mentioning here. The estimated time it takes to crack a password using a 4-core i5 processor depends on the number of characters in the password. A 7-character password takes 0.29 milliseconds to crack. Add 1 character and make it 8, it now takes 5 hours to crack. 9 characters takes 4 months to crack. A 10-character password will take 1 decade to crack, and a 12-character password will take 2 centuries to crack. So the longer the password, the better. And of course, as I mentioned last week, the more random the password, the better as well. So forcing a strong password will automatically make it more difficult to gain access to a website. Now, using iThemes Security Pro, I turn on a feature that forces the user to create strong passwords. It'll give every password a score, and until it's strong, it won't let you create the account. So new users must enter a strong password to create their account. And if I add this security plugin on after the fact and there's already users, any existing user will be forced to upgrade their password the next time they log into the website. So when they log in, they'll get a message saying your password isn't strong enough. Please choose a new password. So a strong password is the first measure after hiding the backend. It's the first real security measure I use to secure my clients' websites. Now, the next thing I do is I turn on a feature in iThemes Security Pro to prevent compromised passwords. Because one of the main vulnerabilities with passwords is their reuse. Many people think up of a smart password that they think, oh, nobody's going to guess this, and then they go and use it everywhere. Well, all it takes is for one of the databases that they use their password on to get breached and their username and password to be stolen. And now the hacker has the right information to gain access to everywhere that person uses their email and password in combination. Now, iThemes Security Pro has a nice feature that connects to Have I Been Pawned, which, if you're not familiar with, is a website where you can put in your email address and it'll tell you if it's come across any databases that have been hacked that had your address, email address, and password in. So iThemes Security connects to that database, the API from Have I Been Pawned, and it looks at the password and the username that are being entered. And if it sees that these in combination have been used anywhere else, specifically on a compromised database, it will not allow somebody to use them. And if they try, it'll say that you cannot use this, please use a different password because it's been found in a compromised database. Now, if you're not familiar, I will have a link for Have I Been Pawned because it's spelled a little bit differently. The website, Pawned, is actually PWNED. And I believe it's .com. I didn't actually look that up. Maybe I should have, but you can find it. And I'll make sure to have a link in the show notes for this episode at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 124 if you're curious. Because I, on a regular basis, will go into Have I Been Pawned and just enter my email address to see if anything, any databases, because you use your email all over the place for stores, for signing up, for memberships, everything. And it's nice to know if it's ever been compromised somewhere. Now, as part of this prevention method that I use, every client that I work with, I explain how to use a password manager. I personally suggest 1Password because it's the one that I use. I've been using it for years. But I know that LastPass and some others work just as well. I've never used them, so I'm not familiar with them. I prefer 1Password. But it amazes me how many people that I talk to that don't know about password managers. They don't even know they exist. And it's funny because usually once I explain it to them, they are like, wow, I got to start using that right away. You mean I only have to remember one password that is not really going to be used anywhere, and all these other ones can be secure passwords that nobody will ever guess? Well, yeah, that's the way it works. I've had many, many clients over the years thank me for introducing them to password managers. Now, the next thing I do to secure the login access to a website is to limit the login attempts. Because even a strong password doesn't mean that it can't be guessed if given enough time or by random chance. So as an extra measure, I turn on what's called brute force protection. Now, I do this again using iThemes Security Pro, but there are other plugins. I know one that I was using for a bit was called Loginizer. It's a free plugin that you can use for this. And what it does is it prevents the number of failed login attempts, or not prevents, it limits the number of failed login attempts. Now, I have it set up in iThemes Security Pro that if somebody fails 3 times, so they put in their username and password 3 times and it fails, they get locked out of the site for 15 minutes. They can't try to log in again for 15 minutes. And after the 3rd time that they get locked out, so after the 3rd 15-minute lockout, their IEP address is actually banned from ever viewing the site, not just accessing it, but viewing. That IP address will never see that website again. So that's an added security measure, which means they technically only get 9 attempts to get into the website, and it takes them 45 minutes to do so. And after that, they'll never see the website again. So limiting the login attempts through something like that, brute force protection, is a great way to secure the access to a website. And the next is my favorite method of securing a website, and this is two-factor authentication. Now, I've talked about 2FA, as it's sometimes referred to on the podcast before, but in case you're unfamiliar with the term, two-factor authentication adds an extra step to the login process on a website. And this extra step drastically increases the security of a website. Now, once again, I use iThemes Security Pro for this. And the way it works is after somebody enters their username and their password and they hit enter, they're then brought to another page that asks them to put in their security code. And this is a 6-digit code that they need to gain access to the website. And this is a temporary code. The code's only good for a certain amount of time. Now, it can be generated from a predetermined list. You could set it up so that it emails the code to the user, but my preferred method is to use an app on the smartphone. Now, I personally use the Google Authenticator App, and that's the one I get all my clients to use, because chances are, wherever you are, if you're going to access a website, you're going to have your smartphone nearby. Now, the way this works is the app on the phone generates a new 6-digit code every 30 seconds. So when you log into the website, you enter your username and your password, then it takes you to a screen and it says, please enter your security code. You look at your phone and it shows you a 6-digit code. Well, you enter that code and you have 30 seconds in order to log in before that code expires and a new code appears. So the only way at this point to gain access to a website is to have the username, have the correct password, and to have access to the smartphone tied to the account. And that's why I love two-factor authentication, because it drastically increases the security on a website to prevent people from accessing it through the standard login page. Now, there is one more thing I want to talk about. I'm going to touch briefly on this, and it's a new feature, fairly new feature in iThemes Security Pro, and that's passwordless login. The way this works is that every time you want to get access to a site, you enter your email address just like you would in the username and email section, and then it sends you an email with a link. They call it a magic link to gain access to the site. So you never have to remember or enter a password. You just put your email address, they email you an email, you click on the link, and you have access to the site. Now, this is great if you are always going to be accessing the website from one computer, and it's the computer with that email address on. Because although it's a very secure method, I don't personally like using it because sometimes I need to access one of my clients' websites through their account instead of my own admin account. Sometimes I want to see something from their perspective if I did not make them an admin on the account. And I wouldn't be able to do that because with this method, when I entered in their email address to gain access to the site, the email would be sent to them with a link to click on, and that's no good to me. So for that reason, I never use the passwordless login, although I understand it is a very strong feature to turn on if the site will always be accessed from the same computer where the email address is delivered to. So all of these methods together create a very, very strong website access security barrier, meaning it will be very difficult for somebody to gain access to the website just through hacking the username and password. Enough so that they'll probably get deterred and decide to go attempt on some other site instead of yours. Now, the next step that I do in my security process, this is what I offer on a monthly basis, my maintenance package. When I include security, I include everything I just talked about and then this. So the next step is WordPress site monitoring. And this is why the monthly fee. Because while the account login is secure, you still can't rest easy saying, well, nobody's going to get into the website. Because there are other ways to hack a website as well. And I want to know if something happens to one of my clients' websites. So the first thing to know about this is security logs. Now, I use iThemes Security to view the security logs. In fact, I don't even know how to get to the logs without iThemes Security. They give you access. I think they're available if you go through the database, but I'm not good enough or I don't understand that part or I've never looked into it. I just use iThemes Security to view the logs. And the default logs are a great resource for seeing what's happening on a site. It keeps track of all sorts of stuff. Now, when I just look at the security logs, that will provide me the best information should something happen to a site, should a site get compromised. It'll give me the best information in order to recover the site. Now, even with this access, I'll be honest, I'm not that great at sifting through the logs. I'm not 100% sure of what I'm looking at when I see them, but I can tell when something's right or wrong because it marks it in green or in orange and red. Something red is something critical, and sometimes it spells it right out for you, but If not, if it's something I'm not sure of, the logs make it really easy for me to download them and be able to share them with an expert, somebody I can get involved to help me should I need it. Plus, I'll be honest, I like looking at the logs just to see because they will tell you how many hack attempts the security measures you put in place have prevented. And I remember once looking at a website and saying that in one day, it had blocked over 12,000 hacking attempts. And when you see that and it's behind, with a green check mark saying everything's okay, it makes you feel good about what you do. So security logs, they don't help you secure the site, but they're a valuable source of information should the site get compromised. Now, the next thing I do is iThemes Security allows me to monitor when files on a website are changed. Anytime a file gets changed, I get notified. Let me tell you, if you turn this feature on, turn it off anytime you're doing updates to a website because you're going to get bombarded with warning emails saying, oh, this changed or that changed. And I know times like when I update plugins or that, I know I'm going to get emails saying that the files have changed on the website because I just updated the plugin. So if you know things are being updated or changed, it's not a big deal. But what's good to have is other times when out of the blue, you get an email saying a file on the website has changed and you're saying, well, I didn't do anything and that's not something my client would have done. What's going on here? So this is another great way. It'll notify you if there's any nefarious actions taking place on the website and allows you to take the next step. Now, another thing that I offer as part of my security package is scanning for malware. Now, again, I use iThemes Security Pro and starting to see a pattern here, iThemes Security Pro. I have it set up to notify me if it detects any malware on a website, and it scans it on a regular basis. And this has saved me in the past. I have on 3 occasions that I can remember been notified that malware was detected on a website. Now, I couldn't see anything wrong with the site, but when the plugin detected that, I took measures and rectified the situation right away. And maybe I fixed it before anything can escalate because I was notified as soon as it detected something. So monitoring the website is crucial to a good security plan. You monitor the security logs, you monitor when files have changed, and you monitor for malware. Now, the next thing I do as part of my security package is theme and plugin management, because it's much, much easier to hack a website if it has outdated themes or outdated plugins. So the first thing I do if I take over a website or if I'm done building a website is deactivate and delete any plugins that are not being used. If they're not active, remove them. You can always reinstall them later if you need to, but there's no sense to have any plugins on a website if they're not active. Also, make sure whatever plugins you use on a website are from a reputable source. I've seen some, let's say, questionable WordPress plugin bundles recently that offer thousands of dollars of premium plugins for next to nothing. Like, for $29, you can get $5,000 worth of premium plugins. Now, this may sound like a steal, and I know people have tried them and say, oh, I tried it and the plugin works perfectly. But what you may not know is somebody may have gone in and compromised those plugins and added something to them, even though the plugin still works. It may be doing something behind the scenes. So anytime you see one of these bundles where they have thousands of dollars worth of premium product for next to nothing, I'd be really, really leery. It's not worth risking your business over or your reputation over, because you don't want your clients to find out that the reason their website got hacked is because you skimped in order to save a few bucks on a premium plugin. But when it comes to plugins, many of the updates and releases are in order to patch security vulnerabilities. And that's why it's important to keep websites updated. Now, iThemes Security Pro has a really nice feature called version management, which allows a site to automatically update itself as new versions of plugins and themes are released. I will admit that although this is a really handy feature, I actually leave it off. I don't use it. I prefer to update plugins myself, just in case something breaks in the process. It's happened before where I've gone to update a plugin and something happens on the website and I have to troubleshoot it right there on the spot. Well, if the plugins are being updated automatically, I might not know that a website is broken. So for that reason, I always opt to update the plugins myself. The only thing I do turn on from this feature is there is one thing it will do is auto update if the update or the fix is for a vulnerability, a security vulnerability. So in that case, I turn it on. Because if there's a plugin or a theme that has a security hole that hackers can gain access to the site through, that I don't want to wait. I want that updated right away. So I turned it on that if there's a security vulnerability, update the plugin. If it's an update just because the plugin's been updated for bug fixes and stuff like that, wait and I'll do it on my own. Now for updating my client websites, when I do it on my own, I use iThemes Sync. I know there are other platforms that are similar to this. I have heard from other people that they use different things. But as I mentioned, I've been using iThemes, their family of products, for so many years now that when Sync came along, it was just a no-brainer for me to keep using it as part of the whole iThemes family. Now, what iThemes Sync does is it allows me to monitor and update all my clients' websites from one dashboard. And when I say allows me to, normally my virtual assistant handles this for me. She does this on it used to be years ago, it was on a monthly basis. Then it went to a bi-weekly. But now in the past few months, hacking attempts have gone way up. So I've asked her to do it on a weekly basis. So once a week, she'll go into iThemes Sync and run all the updates and then verify all the websites to make sure everything is working properly. And if there's an issue, then she can contact me. But iThemes Sync does send me daily emails letting me know what plugins and what themes need to be updated and on which sites that they are. And I or my VA can log into the iThemes dashboard and perform all the updates from that one place. So if the theme Divi, I use Divi on all my websites. If Divi needs an update or has an update, I or she can click on one button and every website that has Divi on it will get updated. It doesn't do them all at the same time. It does it in sequence, but you can sit there and watch. You click update all, and you'll see one website, it says updating, done updating. Next site, updating, done updating. Next site, updating, then done updating. So it goes through the whole thing and the whole list there. So you can say, okay, update the themes on all the sites. Okay, once that's done, now update this plugin, and it'll list this plugin is installed on all of these websites. And you can update them individually, saying I want to update it on this site and this site and this site. Or you can just check off and say, update this plugin on all the sites that it's installed on. For example, 40 websites, I'm just giving a nice round number, 40 websites, you can update all the plugins on 40 websites in probably 2-3 minutes max. And that's why I love iThemes Sync. And from there, me or my virtual assistant, every site listed there, there's a quick button. You can click on a button and it'll actually take you to that WordPress website's back end. Like it automatically logs you in. It bypasses everything else and logs you in so that you can go verify that the site is working properly. Now, I do use the paid premium version of iThemes Sync, which allows some extra features that I'm not going to get into right now because they don't have to do with security. They just allow you to do other things with your websites. But if you want to give it a try and see just the basic features, which includes managing updates on websites, you can sign up for an account and manage up to 10 websites for free. So check that out by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/iThemes and signing up for iThemes Sync. Even if you don't have the other iThemes programs, you can still try iThemes Sync. And the final thing that I want to talk about is domain security, which is part of the website. Whenever you or your client registers a new domain name, I always strongly suggest, that you pay whatever extra fee it costs for domain privacy. Now, some web hosts domain registrars include this as part of the price. I know Pork Bun, which I have a few domains registered at, they include every domain that you buy includes privacy. Other places, you have to purchase it per domain. And then there's some places, I use a company called Names Pro in Canada to register domains. I pay one fee and it protects all my domains. And if you're not sure what this does, is domain privacy hides the email address associated with the domain. You can go to a Whois database, put in a domain name, and it'll tell you who owns the domain, what their email address is, what their phone number is, what their street address is, and all their information so that you can contact them or people can contact whoever owns the domain. But when you have domain privacy, that information is blocked. Only where the domain is registered has that information. So if the police need to get a hold of it or something like that, they can contact the domain registrar and they can get the information, but the general public cannot. And the reason I say you should hide this is because most of the time, the email address associated with the domain is the same email address that you would use to log into the website. So without privacy, you're handing hackers half of their login information right there. They don't have to guess the email address. They just use the one that's associated with the domain name. So I insist or strongly encourage all my clients to pay the extra price to get privacy for their domain names. So that's pretty well what I do for the security side of my maintenance package. As I said at the beginning, there are many, many different tools that you can use to do the same things that I just talked about. Some of the tools are possibly better than what I use, but I don't know. I've been using iThemes Security and iThemes Sync and Backup Buddy and all the iThemes programs for so many years that I trust them. And sometimes that's what it comes up to, because there may be some less expensive solutions out there, but I won't try them out because I rely on these ones. And I also know that anytime I've had an issue, which are few and far between, but anytime I've had an issue with any of the iThemes programs, their support has been really, really good in helping me find a solution. Now, I know this episode may sound like it's just a big commercial for iThemes, but it's not. I made this episode because I wanted to share with you the strategy I use for securing my and my clients' websites. And I encourage you to do something similar, whether you use iThemes or not. You need to have something in place to prevent websites from becoming compromised. And if you want to use iThemes, as I said, you can go to resourcefuldesigner.com/iThemes, sign up for iThemes Security Pro or Backup Buddy or Sync or any of the other iThemes programs or products. Because so far, they've worked for me, knock on wood. So I would love to know, how do you handle WordPress security? Leave me a comment for this episode at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 224. Now, I want to remind you, if this is still the month of July 2020 and you haven't done so already, I would love to get your nomination for the podcast awards. Please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/podcast awards and select Resourceful Designer from both the arts and the education category. And if you want to be part of a great community of designers who are all eager to grow and to help each other, check out the Resourceful Designer community at resourcefuldesigner.com/community. And finally, take the advice I share in the tip of the week and get outside, clear your mind, rejuvenate your creativity, and just refresh yourself. You'll notice a huge difference when you get back to work. So that's it for me this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, I am Mark DeCote, wishing you all the best with your design business. And as I do at the end of every podcast, I want to remind you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.